All right, it's Find Out Friday.
All right.
This is where the senior devs and the younger devs get it together and answer questions as we go.
We're not that much younger.
The learners and
the dumber. No.
I don't know, man. I'm too tired. Evan, what do you got?
Yeah, so basically, kind of as I was going through getting caught back up in the forums land, and I was running across a couple people that were like asking about boards and board templates. So I was kind of cruising through the docs, and I kind of understood. And I'll go ahead and share my screen briefly here. One sec. So, so this is. Let me know when y'all can see my screen.
We can see it.
Excellent. So I was just kind of going through the docs, and they're definitely good, and I'm getting kind of an idea of how these are built. But one thing I was struggling with was kind of figuring out how it all goes together, because a lot of it is kind of defined, in the different components, but I wasn't sure like because I know that like with blocks, for instance, like blocks are a little more like self-contained, in terms of like you make a block, it's a directory, it has everything it needs in there. But I guess I don't really need to share this actually. I wasn't really clear on how, like, for instance, if I'm like a developer, because a lot of these developers in the forums are like, well, I think I need to like install the documentation piece of Atomic in order to get boards going. And Andrew was like, no, you don't need to do that. You just need to make a board template. And then so I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. I'm gonna go figure out how to make a board template. But I was struggling a little bit, like kind of like what's each piece part that goes into making a board template, because it seems like there's XML over here and yonder, and then there's some PHP over here and yonder, and it's all kind of tied to a theme, I think. So anyway, I just thought it would be a good opportunity to toss it over to Andrew and just be like, what's the gestalt here? How does it all go together? And how would I, as a developer coming in, kind of like, okay, I want to make a sweet board that does sweet stuff, but I don't want to have anything to do with Atomic or anything. Like, I'm coming at it, totally green. So
sure. Before we get into it too deep, I can give some context on some of the questions that were, or maybe some of the reasons why people thought you had to do the documentation, or because a bug report came in and I looked at it, and I think there is an issue where today, if you install Concrete empty, it actually installs it with Elemental, and that came up before. People are like, hey, we should probably just make it do an Atomic version of that, since Atomic is the theme that people use these days, and it's better anyway, so why would you default to Elemental even if you wanted a blank site? And that's fine, but there's another reason why we ought to do that anyway, because there's actually some additional stuff that gets installed when you install the theme for the first time, if it's your sample content. And this is actually probably something we should fix, because what it basically means is there's a few different templates that only Atomic has support for in the core, like some summary templates. So what that means is Atomic has this thing like image on the left, image on the right, image with description, and it also has board templates, and Elemental doesn't have any of that and doesn't support any of that. So if you install Elemental, none of that stuff gets installed. If you install Atomic, all that stuff gets installed. You can make a board, that's great, but which is fine, except if you do the weird edge case of you install the blank site because you want a blank site, and then you're like, okay, but I want Atomic because that's the good theme, so I'm going to take my blank site and apply Atomic to it. And then all of a sudden you have Atomic, all the blocks work because they always will, and they all get installed regardless, but you are missing those crucial little pieces of content. You're missing the board templates, you are missing the summary templates. And I don't actually know if you installing the documentation somehow backends those back into being installed. It's actually possible that could work. I think in the longer term, what we ought to do is move that stuff into the theme installation, or activation. So if you if you install any theme and then you switch to a different one, any of those little components that theme also has access to, like it could inject those as well. So you wouldn't have this. That's not really relevant to your question specifically, but you know, as for having an answer as to why people might be scratching their heads on that, I didn't have that answer before, and then I looked at it after this bug report came in, and it's like, oh, actually, in that case, that totally would be the case, and moreover, there's no real easy way to install that stuff without just reinstalling with Atomic Full and then deleting all the content, which is kind of lame. So that is something that we ought to fix. But yeah, to answer the larger question, how do these things go together? Yeah, it's interesting because these are developer docs, and so they get really into the nitty-gritty really fast. And so they dive right into the XML for how to create these things programmatically as a developer. So it does kind of like lend itself to having a knowledge of what that stuff already is. Let me take a look really quickly. I'm hopeful, but I guess hopeful is the wrong word, but I'm crossing my fingers that maybe this stuff already exists. So if you look into, and maybe you already have, there is a board section to the user guide that has some documentation that is perhaps at a slightly higher level than the documentation that you already linked. So it goes through how to actually create a board and configure the data sources and set one up even without having to build all that stuff from scratch. Have you by any chance had a chance to see that maybe?
Yeah, I've read through this. It kind of stops you at the template portion because you don't have templates. So I guess that's where I was a little bit, it didn't really help me in terms of like, as a developer, like, okay, but where do all the files go? Like, how do I?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's fair. And it also, I see, it doesn't appear as though we have any user level docs for these summary templates, which are really the kind of most interesting part of the whole thing, to be honest. So let me perhaps see if my local install has is up and running and could be worked with.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. No, you can tell I haven't talked this much in about 5 days. The COVID coughs there.
Yeah, it sneaks up on you.
No, so okay, let's so yeah, the idea behind the general architecture here, even setting aside boards, is there are pieces of content that you might want to have be the same. They're kind of content agnostic, whether that a theme would support. So if you're, for example, showing a list of content and it's got a thumbnail on the left and a piece of text on the right, it doesn't really matter to it shouldn't matter to the developer whether the piece of content they're showing in this form factor is a page, a calendar event, an offsite link to a third-party resource, etc. What it really should be is that you build the markup to display the stuff nicely with whatever hover states you want on your thumbnails, or however you want, whatever markup you use to mark up a list of resources. And then it shouldn't have to call page-specific methods on this and then build a different one for a calendar event or whatever. And so that's where the idea of the summary templates came from, is that if an object type supports the summary object, and pages do, calendar events do, I think that might be the only one that does out of the box, but the plan was always to have more than that. If it supports that, then the theme developer can build templates for those things, but not have to concern themselves with how the data makes its way into the template. So you can build, and by default, the ones that are installed in the core are, let's pull that directory up.
I think it's calendar and page, right?
Yeah, or that's the objects.
Oh, duh. Oh, the template says blog left.
Yeah,
blog stuff.
It's brutal because I, of course, can't seem to find it. I know that it's here. Okay, summary template. So the ones that are installed with Atomic are, they're called blog entry card, blog image left, blog image right, blog image top, and resource page. And it's kind of funny because the way that we actually use these in practice doesn't really lend itself to being anything more than just pages. But the idea is that this same form factor, this same type of template can be used wherever you might need to refer to, well, in theory, anything but a page. So you might use a page list block might render pages in a particular summary template as well as a board, and you don't have to. It takes care of code duplication, etc. And so to actually show another aspect of this that is kind of compelling. You can kind of see here in an Atomic install on a blog page. You can see if we go to the blog page itself, we've got a board that takes care of this stuff. All of these different things that are being shoved into board slots are different summary template instances for the different blog pages. So, I mean, it's chosen kind of at random, but there are rules at the template level that say which ones can go in there. So off the top of my head, the blog template that is here that has this large slot across the top will only let you do the image on the left and image on the right things, because we know that this template would look bad in this large space up here. So only templates that really skew horizontal can go in here. And then other blog posts might get rendered in different ways down here. And if we go to an actual blog entry, you can see, and go into design, you can see this is a quick and easy way to see which sort of summary templates are installed and working for a given thing. Here you can see the default summary. The blog is available to be shown in pretty much all of the different summary templates, including the default one, which exists because you kind of need one, but it's like the most bargain basement one. It doesn't support an image. It only has a title and a link and a description. And then you've got blog image left and right, and then image top. There's this card one, which looks kind of silly when it's actually blown up into this selector. But when you see it in the actual blog interface itself, it's a bit more compelling. I believe this is the one that's actually being used there as well. So and I try to remember if we use this here as well. So yeah, this is a page list. Let's look at this. Yeah, so you can see in the blog entry grid custom page list template. You can see this is a page list template, which is block custom templates have been available for, since the beginning. But here we're actually rendering the page within, all this really does is show a page list header, which you can get from the block. And then in the past, we might have looped through these pages and put a bunch of markup in here, and that would have been fine. But then when we want to reuse it elsewhere, we're copying and pasting stuff or including elements in it. We're doing it. Every way we're doing it is always kind of done in an ad hoc way. And even if we kind of have best practices to rely on, it's still kind of ad hoc. But what we're doing here is we are forcing this to render in the blog entry card summary template, which you can kind of see here. This is what a summary template view looks like. All this data doesn't have to be defined by the developer at all. It's basically assumed that if you define your summary templates and say, this is a summary template, I'm calling it Andrew's awesome thumbnail blog entry. And it, in order to have this available for your piece of content, you need to make sure your content has a link, has a thumbnail, has a title and a date. Otherwise, it won't be available at all. If you do that, the objects behind the scenes will take care of populating those for all of the different things that supports them. And then if you are adamant and say, look, this template looks terrible if you don't have a description, it looks crazy with just a title, you have to have a description in this template for it to be supported. And I think those docs show how you define that in the XML. Then you can know that if a user makes a page and they don't specify a description, that when it comes time, when the system assigns the available summary templates to that page behind the scenes, and this happens anytime a page is approved or the new version of the page is made, it will only assign the templates that are strictly supported. And if you don't have a description defined, it will not be assigned for that page. So really, before you can really care that much about boards, it's kind of almost more important to really understand how the summary templates work, because they are the easiest, they are the easiest way to kind of do something cool with these new systems without having to, really get into the deep end of the pool. Like if you were to look at this blog entry, or this blog board here, it would be pretty easy for a developer to add a new one of these templates. And I think the easiest way to do it would probably be to make a new package with that XML defining some additional summary templates for pages. And then within the active theme, you would just add those new template files. And you could do any number of different stuff, like, a template that has the image change color, or a template that has the title floating on top of an image, or has no image whatsoever but has a title and the date showing up like a calendar icon or something like that. So, and then once you do that, you can kind of start worrying about how the boards are how the boards sort of work with that stuff. At a high level, they all have templates. So this template is named blog. It's sort of shared across all themes that you might be using, but again, we only install it when we install Atomic. That's kind of a way that we handle that. But it's you can see when you go into Atomic, there's this Atomic Elements Boards blog.php. That's where that's loaded from. And, it's a little bit different syntax than working with page templates, but it shouldn't be totally a foreign concept. If you have worked with page templates, you just kind of display slots and you give them a number. That's how they work. And you can kind of check whether a slot has contents. If you want to show some different markup, you display the different slots in the different places. And then you can do other crazy stuff there too. Like here's us showing a stack in the side of a template, and that's how we do this this part of this thing. That's not, that's totally custom stuff being rendered out of a stack that still works, which is pretty cool. And then once you get into that, anything you define as your data source, like we've got our blog here and we're saying, hey, give me all this content into the past and into the future. It's basically just the only thing I'm shoving into this board are pages of type blog entry, but I could add in a calendar if I were so inclined. And then the next thing that you care about are the board slot templates. So yeah, again, there's 3 different kind of templates that you're going to kind of care about when you're working with this stuff. There's the board template, which is kind of the easiest thing because it's the outer shell. There's the content summary templates, which I already blathered on significantly, and that's sort of used even outside of boards, and it's meant to make content display at its most granular atomic level pretty divorced from the type of content that it's showing. And then you've got these board slot templates, and these are also installed by the theme itself. You could just use any templates. I don't know why we have this checked and are showing all of them. In the past, we definitely locked this in some use cases for like the Army. We don't necessarily show all of the different types of templates in all cases. But basically, these are 4 different types of board slot templates, which are also included in Atomic. And it's confusing because since this is for the board, since this is for the blog board, we've given all of these slot templates names like blog image left, blog image right, which is cute, but it also overlaps with the summary template names, which makes it really freaking confusing. But maybe if we look at it in the file system, it'll make more sense. So here inside elements, boards, slots, there are these slot templates. And so these at the board level are the slots. Like here's slot number 1, for example, in blog featured post. And slot number 1 will be populated by a slot template of one of these different varieties. We've got blog image left, blog image right. And looking at this, you're like, well, this is weird, dude. Like these are all just showing, like this is like a slot that just wraps on another slot. And that is true. And that's because the image left and image right don't have any markup associated with them except for whatever happens to go into it from a summary content perspective. But if you do, and then that's also the same for the blog card. But if you look at the sort of the slots that are a little bit more interesting from a display level, like if I go into my blog board, you can see we've got this one here, and you're like, well, that's cool. I don't see anything like that in here. That's because all of this entire row is a slot that has put a blog 3-up summary template in it. And within that, there are 3 content slots, and those contain summary templates as well. So that's how we get these kind of interesting displays where it's not just, the boring, here's an image, here, here's alternating things, or here's one thing on a row repeated forever. We actually get really interesting content because we have these slots that can contain more than one piece of content, wrapped with any number of different pieces of markup. And you might ask yourself, well, that's interesting, but why do you have these blog image left and blog image right templates if they are exactly the same? Like, what's the point of that? And the point of that is, I'm gonna try to remember where it actually lives. Maybe it will. If I go into here, it will make more sense, but it probably not. Maybe it's, no. Go into, we can feel free to cut this out. Share this with somebody. Okay, so all right, well, I'll dive into this part and see if I can figure out where the rest of it is in a second. But so what the next part that's kind of interesting with this is there is also a level of there is a algorithm in a sense, but it's very planned, so it's not really much of an algorithm. But there is a strategy when generating these boards as well. So I mentioned earlier that there's this big slot across the top of the board, of the blog board, and we don't let you put summary templates like this in it because it would look bad. And the way that we do that is there is a board template driver for every board, and this doesn't have to exist. but you can see it's automatically loaded based on the fact that, and I think this is talked about in the docs as well. But there's anytime you render the board with the handle blog, it will create this driver, and this driver tells Concrete how many slots there are, which is the most important thing, because it needs to know that when it's putting content in it. For example, we will do our best to show interesting pieces of content, and we'll show more than, one thing per line, and we'll show the 3-up template or the 2-up template. But if you only have 4 pieces of content in your 4 pieces of content that are going to make its way into a board, we're not going to shove 3 of them on one line and then just have a bunch of empty slots. Like, we're going to do our best to fill as much of the board as possible. And if we have extra, we will try to add, make some of those slots, 2 or 3 up or whatever, but we will do our best to not also repeat the same content. So it's important that we know how many slots are available within a board template. And so that's why we return this 5. And if we look at the actual template here, you can see there are only actually 5 slots that template renders. And then the next thing that we have is we have this get layout planner, which is an optional thing, but it lets you provide an object to Concrete that lets you tell it some rules for when it populates the board. And the only one that we care about for the blog is the one I said before. In the top slot, in slot number 1, you can only use the blog image left board slot template, and that's this guy right here. But if we delve a little deeper into the slot driver, you can see that the slot drivers also have, or each one of these slot templates also has a driver class as well. So it's almost like these front-end templates have a controller behind the scenes, although we call them drivers. So the blog image left driver here, you can see it can tell how many how many content slots it has, which is just 1. But it also says, hey, I'm going to let you put summary objects in here, but they have to be this template. So that's why we have all these weird little pseudo templates that don't have anything in them except this. It's because they actually do have something interesting to offer the world, but it's all at this logic layer where it says, hey, I'm going to put summary templates with the name blog image left in them. And then same with this one, blog image right. And that's kind of how we map those board templates to the summary templates. And then the blog 3-up might make a little more sense as to why we would even care about some of this stuff, because here we've got that for the blog 3-up summary template, which we have here. We actually have 3 slots in there. And that's what this is for. Total content slots is 3. And then we are saying, look, since this is going to be used in a context that's like this, it's going to look terrible if somehow this thing makes its way into this slot down here. It's going to look ridiculous. So instead, what we're going to do is we're only going to let templates where blog entry card is a acceptable summary template. And, since all that stuff filters up, what that means is that if a content developer comes here and says, look, this thing is fine, everything we have is fine, and this is more of a concern at, something like the Army, where, they've got color-coded templates, and sometimes they've got crazy images there too. And so sometimes it's like, look, you guys, we can't use the template that has the blue text on top of whatever image you've created there, because it's like you used a blue image, and we told you should use dark images because that'll work for all the different colors, but you didn't listen. So what we're going to do is we're not going to change the image, or maybe you can change it when you get around to it. But what you can do instead is, if you have a content problem where you've got one of these things not working right, you can actually turn off some of the templates for this thing. So you can say, look, this blog entry card looks bad with this thing, so I'm going to just turn it off. And then when you regenerate the board, that this blog post will not render anywhere that is chosen to be forced to use that template. So it really just kind of gives a lot of
control.
Yeah, it's control, and also a separation of concerns, where I feel like in older versions of Concrete, you kind of had to, if you didn't get it right, like we'd let you do anything, but if it would be pretty easy for you to kind of screw it up. And the goal here is to allow for a separation of people who concern themselves with how things are looking versus those who sort of like a front end and back end separation, or allow front end developers to build sort of the board summary or the summary templates and the board templates. And then you don't even need a back-end developer, because the back-end developer is the one is taken care of for you by Concrete's board architecture. So that's kind of the sort of diving into the deep end of the pool aspect of it. To answer one of the original questions, there's not really a great way to add these things except through the XML format, which I think is fine for a developer. But what it does mean is that developers will be the ones adding these, probably through their own custom packages. And that's probably the way that it'll stay for the foreseeable future, although it's not beyond the realm of possibility that all of the pieces of data that we're tracking about a template, like what type of object it works with, what its name is, its form factors, etc. Like, there's no reason that couldn't be exposed through a dashboard interface as well, like page templates. We just haven't done that yet.
What's up, friends?
I have a question. Okay, so let's see. What I think is super cool about boards and this idea is it's always been easy to make granular content with Concrete. We've always done a really good job of, hey, go to a page, make some stuff, and now you have a page. And the web, over the years has matured in such a way that a lot of where people spend time at the list view, right? That's all Facebook is a list view. Like, that's all Reddit is. Like, aggregating this stuff up in a compelling fashion is challenging. We've always had that problem when we're building sites. Like, it's really easy to design the detail, granular stuff, but then it comes time to like the home page and the category page, and the design process feels somehow wrong to me, or like rigid. Like, you'll watch someone like go in Figma and start just kind of like laying out these atomic elements of 3 up and 1 to the side and everything you've been talking about, Andy. And you're thinking, like, why are you prescribing it has to be in this order, in this way? We all know it's going to change when you get in the real world. Where's the creativity I have in putting a block on a page, but at this category level? And so I think the promise of boards and saying, look, you can generate these dynamic layouts that aggregate stuff from different places is really compelling. I think about when that app Flipboard first came out, and like all you do is point it to your existing news sources and it gives you a magazine, and it's like, oh, I actually want to read this. This is nice. That's really cool. I also think that the nuance of controls that we have for a savvy developer who understands how boards work, so we can do things like these rules around, hey, don't put 2 blue stripes next to each other, and don't put, like, that's amazing. Like, there's so much power there. I mean, God save you if you play a drinking game with the word templates, but there is a lot of power there. The one thought that I have, where I think maybe there's an opportunity for us to like find a way to simplify or centralize or something, is containers, custom templates at the block level, and then forget which template we call it, but like just the display template within the board. Yes. Like, from a casual template, human's perspective, from like a casual, like, I can see Lisa's furrowed brow. Like, as a designer, I want to think like, there's this stripe, it's got this image and this text on it. I want to make that in one place, and then be able to use it as a container, use it, have it show up in a board, ideally have it show up. I mean, even Andy, you clicked at one point, you're like, oh, actually, this is a page list. And so it's like, yeah, sorry, sucker, you're going to have to rebuild that to work here. So I guess I'm asking, like, in the big picture, do you think there's an opportunity, maybe in a major version release, maybe in, I mean, I don't know how many people are using boards actively, but is there a way that we could somehow centralize or consolidate that creation process so a casual theme developer could really think about atomic design elements, build a template in one spot, and then be able to feed it to all these different ways to use it, without having to recreate it? So I know for the Army site, like, we recreated a lot of board templates as container layouts because they were like, well, we want to mix and match. And I think that's always going to happen.
Yeah. No, that's
a summary template builder.
template.
Well, and it's funny too, because there's also another reason why another compelling aspect to the summary template idea is, and the idea behind, I want to have the same creative direction, whether I'm showing a page in a list, showing a page in a board, or just linking to a page in a sidebar. I still want to have that little card option because it looks nice. And how do I get that in my, I just want to link to a page. And so we actually have a block in Enterprise Web that is the summary template block that we haven't put into the core, but we really, and I think it's really only because, like, the experience is kind of confusing. I mean, cross that stops us from doing all the rest of this. No, but it would be confusing to just dump in without a little bit more thought. But the end goal of it is good. It's like you can choose a page and then choose the template, and then it will render in one of those many stripes. And like they use that, and like it'd be nice to be able to, make a sidebar in Atomic that linked to one of these blog pages and reuse the summary template that you might use in a page list. And so having something like that in the core in a smart way would be good. I also think, like, having the ability to, another reason why the boards exist as they do is it's true. We have solved the hardest problems and now are struggling with a way to make it more accessible, which is not surprising because it's built to,
that's our MO.
So that there's not an image to the left and followed by an image to the left, or blue followed by blue, and that kind of stuff. It's also meant to be performant. And so that's the other reason why, because we knew we didn't want to do all these computations dynamically on a page load like that. That would be crummy. So boards also do a lot of work to let you do things like pin a stripe to the top, or when they rebuild all their form factors, it's all cached at the slot level, and I think at the view level as well. And so a lot of work has gone into that as well. But there's, with all of that in mind, like, the process by which one creates a board is challenging. And that's assuming you have all the templates that you need. Like, like I could create if you walk through the Atomic blog board, like, at a glance, like, it's not the hardest thing to understand. It's like, well, you name it, you give it a data source, you build the thing, you put it on a page. Like, what's so hard about that? It's like, well, that's true. But like, I have those templates, and those templates we labored over for a while. If I had to create that again from scratch, it would not be as simple a process. And like, it would be pretty nice if there were an easier way to do that. And also, like you said, reuse that stuff across, whether it's a container or a board. Now, I am loath to, influence. What we really need is a, outer template, a container summary board template, wrapper template that can bring all these things together. No, that's not ideal. But yeah, there's definitely, obviously there's room for improvement there, but it's not just...
maybe it's not even rethinking it, but adding something more, Andy. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, like the way we have page defaults as a web interface in your themes area, like, I can imagine a section of the dashboard. If I'm kind of rewinding, like, look, this is great if you're Andy or Corbin, and or over at Concrete Japan,
Building
you actually understand this. But like, if you're just some poor theme developer out there trying to make a buck, like what the actual? So could there be a place that I go where I'm like, I want to make a new atomic design element, and I'm going to upload that code, and it's going to scaffold it out and give me some choices of, is this a container, summary template, like, and so we wouldn't necessarily have to, because I mean, we don't want to rethink everything that we've done here, and the granularity of the control that we have, you know, I mean, we call it machine learning or AI without that much difficulty with the engine that you've built around the rules, around what it should and shouldn't do, and like that's going to be really compelling in the big picture. I don't want to kill that,
Yeah,
but it does suck to be like the only way a casual theme developer could actually use all this is to make it in all these different places. Because I feel like fundamentally the promise is, as you said, like you're kind of doing a style guide. You're kind of saying, I always want the title, image, subtext to basically feel like this. And so my user flow, as I'm thinking, or my designer flow, should really be that. Like what, and also maybe a concern for the breakpoints. Like how does this look at these breakpoints? Let me give it a name. Okay, here's all the different ways you can use that. And maybe it's really just as simple as giving someone some guide rails through even documentation, possibly some kind of dashboard interface. So it's not quite so like through the looking glass, because it feels a little bit that way right now.
Well, and I know that one thing that we have an open issue for, it's significant enough that I mean, 9.2 is going to be a pretty significant release, so it's not impossible that it could come in a 9 dot whatever release, because it's not it's not a challenge with regards to backward compatibility. But one way where our solution feels a bit archaic these days in ways that it didn't feel a decade ago is all of these are competitors to us have some system by which you can add content to a page that already actually shows up as you add it, which seems like a no-brainer in retrospect. Like all of our content, as you add it to the page, it comes in empty, or it comes in, whether that's a container or a block or whatever. And, in WordPress land and Squarespace, when you're adding this stuff to the page, you can it not only comes in with default content. I think default content is too short-sighted. I don't need to see lorem ipsum in the content editor to know how to put content in there. But what I really want more than anything is like you kind of hit on before, is defaults for content as well as like page type defaults. Like we have these page type defaults because we recognized 15 years ago that it was pretty miserable to have to add a nav to a page every single time you added a page. Like, shouldn't that's always going to be there? Let's add that, but still make it through the CMS. By contrast, like if I'm always, adding a, calendar event, that looks a certain way to the site, because I always want this featured stripe that's a calendar event, but maybe the event changes. Like I should be able to have that, and to be able to drag that into the page, have it just show up, and then tweak it as necessary. And where it really comes in handy is with like the containers, where you all of a sudden you have a community stripe, which is the same image in the background and a title and maybe the lorem ipsum in the description. But then once you drag it into the page, it shows up there. You can go in and change the image, but you're not always starting from scratch. I think kind of having something like that, and the ability to, like you said, it would be pretty darn cool if a theme developer could start from some markup, and then we might just scaffold out those little PHP files that you have to have. Like that raises a whole host of concerns with our various levels of security and compliance, with regards to whether we let people create that stuff through Concrete or not, or whether we figure out a way to do it in such a way that it's not actually building PHP files on the fly. But there is room there for sure to make the developer user experience as good as the editor user experience.
Yeah, I like the idea of having defaults in containers, and You know, the challenge with scaffolding anything, I think, is like, you know, like what we saw when we were reviewing
Entity designer, yeah.
Entity designer. Like, well, that's cool, but once you hit publish, like that's
Yeah.
what you get. If you want to edit it, like, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try to, but it's never. You're always going to be going uphill with that. But
or even just
maybe it's not even in core.
files.
Maybe it's a builder, like it's a separate thing. But like as you're making a theme, and so it's not something that ships with the core. Because yeah, it does introduce. Well, wait, you're making PHP files out of the content management system. We haven't done that in the past.
But I mean, again, if this is really something that we think a developer needs, like, there's no we could certainly ship it in a separate. Not in the core, like you said. And again, how much of this is also like just a simple, not even a documentation issue, but a discoverability issue within Concrete. Like,
like
this is how you do it. There's no reason that the board. I mean, in simple things that would help people as well, like the blog board section of the dashboard. Like, it gives you all the fields that you need to like set up the data sources or whatever. But like, it could also pretty darn easily like show you those half a dozen places that I had to hunt around for. Like, it could say like, here is this template. It defines these, just an explanation of how it works. And so it's not just a black box. Like, it has 5 slots, and these slots use these templates, and these templates use these sub templates. And yeah, that's overwhelming, but at least you have now it's not
guardrails, a little bit of like
explanation,
little training wheels. Hey, here's another thought to add to the fire. Like, what if this wasn't something in the core, a la page defaults? What if we built something on top of Figma?
Ooh.
Figma is really cool, and that's what everybody, now that Adobe spent $20 billion on it, like, that's the way people are going to design websites for the foreseeable future. I know you and I enjoy. I mean, you go in there and it's like, oh, I have CSS. It's there. It's done.
Yeah.
Like, looking at that, it's very tempting to want to say, can I just build a Concrete page out of this? Like, is there a button I can press to spit this out as HTML and get a Concrete page? Because that'd be hella cool. Almost remember Edit a Page like 20 years ago, right? Like, yeah, I know it's probably not going to be a perfect theme. You're probably going to want to like how do you deal with breakpoints? And there's a lot of corners there. But maybe if we're really thinking from a designer's perspective of, hey, I'm making these atomic design elements, can I select something and generate everything I need? Maybe we could have a Figma plugin that would give me a package format that is a container, a custom template, and a summary block. And I don't know, obviously I'm, talking out of my bottom, but doing it from there as opposed to within the core and turning the core into a site designer might be an interesting approach and somewhat press-worthy as well.
Yeah. Well, and certainly even if you could take a first pass, if you were concerning yourself with scaffolding out stuff, it'd be a lot cooler if you could scaffold from Figma for a first pass on a Concrete theme. That'd be pretty cool if there were a Concrete theme plugin for Figma that could build. It's like, any page templates you define here, they get created as page templates, and any things here, they get created as block temp. I mean, because I know that there's ways to do heaven knows what. But yeah, that might be
worth thinking about.
Worth thinking about for sure.
Well, there you go, Evan. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm gonna build a whole new universe. Okay, sold. No, I'm just kidding.
Done.
No, and to be fair, like, I know we'd be kind of like ribbing, about like, oh, it's, complicated, but it's a complicated problem. You know what I mean? Like, boards are really, amazing in terms of the logic and all the drivers and things that you were, saying. So, gotta say credit where credit is due there. It's a pretty fancy damn thing. Yeah, but I think that just to answer my question, to help me keep moving with, the forum, people in the forums and stuff, I think the question or the answer I'm taking away is that, like, there's 2 things, and I think that's kind of where I was getting hung up a little bit, is like, summary templates and everything over here is something you'll have to build, and that has it's like XML, and your package would need to basically install that XML, and then you'd have templates for it and PHP files that would have to be, I think, as elements or something, and then the other side of things was your package would also have to install the boards, which would have its own XML, and then it would have its own drivers, I think, and then it would have its own templates within it, and then you'd basically have to marry the two. You know what I mean?
Through the driver code, that's what sort of joins. I mean, by default, it'll use any of it, so you don't have to marry it together. But those driver classes are what gives the board templates the design control that they can or that they need to have or don't need to have. And it's probably, it's true. If you're building a board for Atomic, you could probably get away with, you don't necessarily have to build any new summary templates because there are already, those half a dozen that are in there. And so if you need an image on the left or an image on the right or a card, you're good. But yeah, if you want to add board support to your theme, you will find yourself building summary templates for your theme, which you should do anyway, although I'm sure we've done a poor job of convincing people as to why they should care. And then you will also, need to do a similar process to create the board and board slot templates as well. And then once all that stuff is there, and now you may not need very much in the way of board and board slot templates. For example, in Enterprise Web, there's one board template, which I think is called like 6 stripes or something. And then, as one might imagine, there's 6 slots in that template, and they're all just, a horizontal stripe. And there are, I think we do actually have some that nest within them, but you don't have to. Like you could build a board that is a single template with any number of slots in it and one slot template as well, and then it would just show things up like that. Now granted, that's not the idea behind boards, is that they would look sort of like a cork board with all sorts of different form factors and be visually interesting to look at. And so to do that, you really do have to kind of build these templates and templates that wrap other templates, etc. But you certainly don't have to start with that level of craziness.
Yeah, because I was just thinking of putting together like a little package or something that maybe I can include on the intro page of, the board docs. That would just be like, this is how it's laid out. You know what I mean? Like if you wanted to do it from scratch, like this is what it would look like. So I think, given what you've described there, I think that gives me what I need. I just need the board XML and the board templates and drivers, and then I need the summary templates and then the template XML, and then the package needs to install all that. And I think that would do it. I think just those things. It's just that simple.
As we know, it's just that easy.
Yeah, but I think having that would be good for. I think I got it. It's a few things to keep in the air cognitively, but I think I got it now. And I think that giving that to like these people that are like, well, I'm trying to install documentation from a time, and be like, no, dude, just here's the package. If you want to make a board with the summary template.
Valuable thing to have a standalone, not necessarily because people would use that in production. Like,
right.
Definitely tell them that this is like a learning tool, but sort of a standalone thing. But in terms of the way to isolate all the stuff that shows how this process works, I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. Yeah, in that case, I'll do that, and I'll probably ask you questions, Andrew, because I probably won't keep this all in RAM here. But yeah, I think I get it. So this has been valuable. So thank you. Sweet.
Thank you, everybody.
And I look forward to the written summary, Evan, because I started maxing out the RAM.
You can watch the video again, homie. That's why we
recorded it.
It's a little
recording.
It was great. It was a really good overview for how everything's put together, and that's why I love coming to these things. So.
It's nice.
Sweet.
Nice. Awesome.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone.
You too.
Bye.